This is Igor Volovich from Cumulus. Things are changing with CMMC. Get your update with episode 48 of Federal Tech Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today, we're sitting down with Malcolm Davis, Systems Engineering Manager at Worldwide Technology, and we're going to look at IT service management from the perspective of federal technology professional. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't say we are recording this live from the floor of Elasticon Public Sector down here in Washington, D.C. So, did you get a chance to meet anyone at Elasticon? So, Malcolm, tell me what you learned today.
I did. So I met a number of our partners here today, and there's all sorts of excitement going on next door in the big room.
In the big room. We're in the little room, I guess. I don't know where we're at, but in the little room here. So I want to focus today on IT service management, and the aspect of it I want to focus on is visibility. And I'm trying to come up with a good story about visibility. I think I have a good one. So my avocation is racing. I race in the oceans, Pacific, Atlantic Ocean. Do 2 and 4 mile races. One time I was in a race, I jumped in the water and someone kicked me, knocked my goggles off. I had no visibility. I had to go back to shore, beg someone for a pair of goggles and come back in the race. Wow. I didn't have a good time for that race, but I tell you what, I couldn't have gone 2 miles in the ocean without goggles because I couldn't see. I had no visibility. That's a toss to you. So what about visibility and what about IT asset management? Where does WWT fit in?
Sure. So there's a lot there, right? So WWT actually has a IT service management practice, and we'll go in and help customers identify what type of software, hardware they have in their environment, and help them get situated with a tool that enables them to do discovery, also gives them a single pane of glass of all of their assets. So if I can focus on the asset management portion of this, that's usually the first step once you start managing your IT life cycle. So there's many frameworks to include ITIL to manage your IT, but on the asset management side of the house, we've got a number of partners that we can bring in to assist us doing some assessments. But a common problem, and I'll use a story from a previous customer. We've got customers that have such a large environment that's expanded a little bit out of their control. So they start losing visibility of some of the assets and hardware that they've got in their enterprise environment. And what that does is it starts to create a little bit of technical debt as time goes on. It creates cyber vulnerabilities because now there's equipment and software that's out in their enterprise environment that they sometimes don't know about. Today, this is usually managed by folks that are using spreadsheets. There's a little bit of human error that can occur there. There's some discrepancies, and it's not fed to management in a live kind of manner. So that's where we start to look at automation, the automation of asset management, which is where we bring in tools from one of our partners, Flexera, that provides you that single pane of glass that enables customers to get a grasp of what they have in their environment, how they're consuming it, and try to understand what's being used, what's not being used, so their entitlements reflects there. Also, there's some cost considerations where they start to run into, hey, I've got a large program where we've made a large procurement to deploy to a global network, and we've got some stuff sitting in a warehouse, and we have some stuff sitting in a field. Well, what happens there when people are manually trying to manage stuff that's not directly in their purview, if it's in somebody's closet, out in another state, or sometimes in another country, they don't have visibility over it. They are sending people on airplanes to go do some property management there. We do have the ability to automatically discover some of the tools that are out there, and that allows people to focus on what's actually out there in the field and what's being consumed. One of the items that we've dealt with in the past is a customer had a large program supporting a DoD level network, and they had an enterprise agreement, which is basically the equipment warranty for all of the assets that they have out in the ground. Well, what was going on here was they were being managed by spreadsheets, and there was equipment out in the field that was covered by warranty, but there was also equipment that was sitting in a warehouse, and they were still paying for the warranty on this equipment, brand new in a box, sitting in the warehouse, and getting charged for it. Stuff hasn't even been out of the box. It's brand new. So when we get these asset management tools in place, now the customer has a good understanding of their license consumption, their service agreements, what's covered, what's actually in production, what is sitting in a warehouse in a box. Because you can also tie these systems into existing, let's say, warehouse ordering systems. You can tie them into that so that you can have greater visibility. And again, the ultimate goal there is to get rid of your technical debt, to have that single pane of glass view so you can accurately manage the assets that you have out there, and also see it in real time. That is very important.
You know, Malcolm, when you said the word warehouse, I wrote down data warehouse. So I keep thinking about data, and different things. And so you may have a set of wrenches that are not accounted for, but I think in my world of software, you may have a license which is just as expensive that's unaccounted for, maybe duplicated. And so if you can get visibility into your system, a federal agency can efficiently use the money that they have. I mean, in order to be terrific, you got to be specific. But this is specifically how asset management can save my Govey's money, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is exactly the sense that we get here, utilizing the tools that are provided to us that are out there. Where Worldwide can help there is we can help customers that are making the move to automating how they manage their assets and also their services. We can help them do that integration work and provide them the tools that best meet their needs.
Okay, let's take a step back here. We are recording this downtown Washington, D.C. Within a mile, here's a bunch of federal agencies. Within 10 miles, I think most federal agencies have an asset here. So how are they doing it now? You talked about spreadsheets, but there's got to be other ways to do it now with all kinds of problems. Maybe they're in systems that don't communicate with each other. Maybe they're in systems that are outdated. So how is the typical agency doing now their IT asset management?
Some customers that we've dealt with are kind of operating. We like to use the term silos of excellence. And what's going on is you get multiple projects going on that have their own funding sources, and they are not communicating with each other. Well, what these asset management and service management tools enables them to do is start to get a full visibility of the system that they're running.
My son has a car with 180,000 miles on it, and every time it goes over 50 miles an hour, it rattles. And no one can figure out what's going on, And what I told him, listen, Kevin, you have a life cycle to the car, and at a certain time you have to maybe look at another Toyota or something. And that applies to software development as well, doesn't it? There's this software development life cycle. I think part and parcel of a life cycle is when a system is no longer being used, there has to be an automated way to end the licenses for that, because you can wind up paying a lot for licenses and maybe even pay for maintenance on a license you're not using. And so much like an older car, you can wind up paying for maintenance in the car. It's sitting in the garage.
John, exactly. So we've actually seen a few customers that are going through what they like to call tools rationalization. So back to my earlier comment with the multiple projects operating in silos, there's a number of projects that organizations will stand up that are bringing on their own tools, which are introducing new software into the program. Well, what you start to get is software sprawl or licensing sprawl, and everybody's getting billed differently across the environment. You've got 2 or 3 technology projects that are using the same tools that are operating independently of each other. What that does is the cost starts to spiral out of control, and when those projects are terminated or shut down, those tools are sometimes still left on the network, and that's what causes a bit of a cost creep. And it also introduces some cyber vulnerabilities, because if people don't know that they've got software and hardware sitting out in their enterprise networks, they don't get patched. We know that there is an increasing cybersecurity threat going on globally. So it's important for our customers to understand what they have control over and what they deploy out into their systems.
When you said that, I thought about my son and his old car. Now, if his old car breaks down, he'll put it in the garage and, buy another or whatever. And it's not going to do anyone any harm. However, if you have a software asset that is not being used, it is a potential. It's almost like having something in the garage, gasoline, and it's potential, a lot of trouble there. It's a whole lot of So you've taken an outdated asset. You may think it's outdated. It's not outdated. It's just a malicious actor, is it?
Exactly. Yep. And that's exactly what we're seeing with some of our customers. So we've been able to bring in some tools like Flexera for the assets and ServiceNow. We were also partnered with to help with the service management, which helps them kind of tamper down these fires that they got going on.
And they're there, but you don't realize they're there. So when it comes to budgeting, I heard a presentation this morning at Elastic. They talked about, percentages of revenue they got from different sources. How much are your federal customers investing in their assets and asset management?
So they're kind of slow since I cover the federal space, they're kind of slow to adopt just because there are some constraints there, and they do have pretty unique cybersecurity requirements that are a little more stringent than some other sectors. So they are adopting. We're helping them get there and to accelerate how they manage some of their services and assets. So I don't want to say they're moving very quickly, but they are moving.
Okay, we see this big tsunami coming at us, and it's called hybrid cloud and cloud, and it's clouds everywhere, and people are all interested in making the transition. So if you have a Toyota sitting in a garage in Fairfax, well, that's one thing. But what if you have, all of a sudden you have 50 garages and they're all simultaneously moving to Kansas and you have to manage those at the same time? The degree of difficulty gets a little bit difficult, doesn't it?
Exactly. So the cloud migration is we know cloud, hosting your services in the cloud is a big deal right now. It helps these organizations offset some of the workloads that they have on-prem, and also enables them to diversify some of the services and enables them to be more resilient. But we have a service practice doing cloud migration for some of our customers. Utilizing the tools for asset and service management allows them to understand the licenses that they deploy out into these cloud environments and obviously on-prem as well. It helps them. We come in and help them identify what software should be migrated to the cloud and which assets and software should be continued to be managed on-prem.
Well, this is a part of the show where I get to use fancy words. So the fancy words I'm going to use are ingress and egress. When it comes to a cloud service provider, I'm going to name names here, okay? Let me name names. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, we all know the CSPs, what they are. And when it comes to the ingress part, you can walk in the door pretty easy. It's pretty simple. You walk in with a credit card and you ramp everything up, and all of a sudden, you're kind of hooked in there. And when it comes to leave, it's a Hotel California situation where you can check out, but you can never leave. And so it's very, very difficult to leave. So when it comes to managing a license, and so there are federal agencies that have hundreds of licenses all over the place in the hybrid cloud, the public cloud, the private cloud, and they have different terms and conditions. And by the way, the cloud service providers aren't going to make it easy to get out of there. They're not. And so someone like you has to come in, look, I've done this before, I've got the T-shirt. This is how you get out of the quagmire you're stuck at CSP. This is what happens, doesn't it?
Exactly what happens. So back to the cloud migration strategy there, we've got customers that are, some are kind of in the initial phases, some are pretty mature. It just depends on where they're at in their life cycle. There's a number of times where people will go in and deploy some of their business assets into the cloud, and they will spin up some resources, and they will get moved to another project while that person is away, not managing the resources that they recently spun up. Those resources continue to spin in the cloud environment, and the customer is being charged for it every month.
You better believe it. Yeah. So, Malcolm, it's February 1st. Had to do my business taxes. I submitted them yesterday on time. And then you go to these categories and everything else. And I saw all of these software as a service solution. I have this service for email. I have this service. I have Zoom every month. I have a lot of it. And this is just me. This is little John Gilroy with my little business I run doing these podcasts. So how does that apply to a large federal agency? I mean, there's 20,000 SaaS service providers out there that just fire it up with a credit card and off you go. And it just seems like this is like stop the world, I want to get off. Should they talk to you before they start signing these things up? I'm sure they can have a policy, but sometimes policies aren't enforced carefully, are they?
Correct.
I'm hitting on something here.
You are hitting it right square there. So yes, they're software as a service. Or hardware as a service. It is, for some organizations, it's the easy button. Those can easily turn into environments that are a little more difficult to manage, which is exactly...
But you're being very carefully phrasing this, by the way.
Yes. But the easy button sometimes can turn into something that's a bit of a bear to control. So now that's where we start introducing the asset management and the service management lifecycle.
Let me talk about the 500-pound elephant in the room. It's called the human being. It's called the human being. It's like, I'm sick of waiting for that John Gilroy to do his job. I'm going to get my credit card, and I'm going to sign up for this service, and he can just figure it out later. And it's called shadow IT. And guess what? There's a lot of John Gilroys out there that, the typical IT professional, they're juggling 10,000 things. They have no time for some little guy down the street who wants something or other. And so all of a sudden, we have all these creative uses of credit cards. And then they go, okay, Malcolm, come on in here. Now you figure it out. I don't know how else to figure it out.
That shines the light on why the service management lifecycle is so important. You get a lot of grayware that people have installed where there hasn't... been due controls for some of the people that are managing their environments, and you also get some grayware that's maybe becomes part of the lifecycle management there that has kind of gotten introduced into the environment under the radar. Exactly what leads back to our service management lifecycle there. So ideally, you're introducing a tool so you've got a grasp of what assets you have out there, what services you're performing, what configuration management databases that are being hosted in your environment, how those are communicating with each other, which ones are not being leveraged, but just soaking up the resources that you have hosted in your environments.
Well, Malcolm, before the show you said you lived in Annapolis, which is great, and I had these water analogies, the swimming one that came off, and now I'm thinking about a boat. And so you can have an old boat out there, you're in the Chesapeake Bay, you're having a real good time, and you get a leak in it. That's no big deal. And you get another leak in it, that's a little deal. Another leak in it, and about their fifth or sixth leak, you're sinking. And so if you have a federal agency that will have death by 1,000 cuts, then maybe there's 50 little software as a service sign-ups that you didn't care about. When there's 150, when there's 500, all of a sudden, well, Malcolm, you don't understand. It says $15 a month. Wait a minute, $15 a month can sink the boat. and I think this is the big fancy word, maybe IT service management. The real world is we have to efficiently use the assets we have and find out what's there, because these little small strokes can really can sink an agency, can it?
Exactly. So when we're talking about sinking the boat, that's where technical debt comes into play. Some of the resources that are being deployed out there are so cost prohibitive and have been unmanaged for so long. Now the agency starts to suffer. The agency suffers in performance, they suffer in delivery to the customer service, and they're suffering for how much it costs to manage all of these services that are being hosted, whether they're being utilized or not.
Malcolm Gladwell famously wrote a book about the tipping point. So when's the tipping point? At what point in time does an agency call you up and go, okay, Malcolm, we're in trouble, come on in and help us figure this out? Is it a certain point in time? Is it they realize that there's 10,000 licenses a month are not accounted for? What is the tipping point to bring someone like you guys in?
Sure. So I'll tell you, maybe there's 3 tipping points. One is where they start to understand that the cost prohibitive of managing all of the assets and services that they have deployed in their environment. 2 is when things start to fail. Equipment ages out, becomes unusable, but it's still being hosted in their environments, and it's starting to impact customer service. And I forgot the third one.
Well, the next interview, we can figure that out. One more question before we end this podcast. So where does Elastic fit in? We're sitting here at the Elastic conference. We're in a lunchroom with about 500 people. So where do they fit in this discussion?
So Elastic actually helps us in a few areas, but they effectively help us give us true data and clean data. I recently read a Gartner report that mentioned 40% of all projects fail without clean data. And that certainly holds true when we start talking about service management.
Wow. Writing that one down, that's important to know. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here, Malcolm. You've been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Malcolm Davis, Systems Engineering Manager at Worldwide Technology.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.